If you're ready to learn 9 essential skills that will up your fiber art game, stay tuned and let's get naughty. Hello, my name's Trent and I'm the Weft Wright. Welcome back to my tiny studio. Today we're going to talk about an essential skill that all fiber artists must have, but in my case, especially weavers, and that is tying knots. Everyone who works with fiber is going to work with some form of string, whether that be yarn, thread, or rope, ends, or picks, whatever you want to call it. We all use this kind of string and we all often need to connect it together. So today we're going to cover 9 different knots, which are essential for any fiber artist, but especially weavers. Whether you're setting up your loom or adding the finishing touches, knowing these knots will make your journey in fiber arts just a little bit smoother. Let's get started.
The first knot we're going to cover is the half hitch. The half hitch is a basis for many other knots, so it's a good one to start with. Wrap your string around a bar, create a loop, and pull the end through that loop. It's as simple as that. It is not very strong, however, so oftentimes when I'm using it, I will form several half hitches on top of each other. Here's one half hitch, and then I'm going around the string instead of the bar to form another half hitch and another, and several more to secure this warp as I've lashed on. This is very similar to the buttonhole stitch or blanket stitch if you're an embroiderer. The next knot we're covering is the overhand knot. I use this at the beginning and the end of a project. At the end of a project, I use it to secure the ends of my twisted fringe. I create a loop near the end and pull the ends through that loop and then tighten. Then I can release and it creates an automatic twisted fringe. This is a particularly handy knot as well for lashing on my yarn. I need to create bouts that won't slip out of my lash-on cord, so I use the overhand knot. I tie an entire bout by wrapping it around my finger to create the loop and then pushing the end of those yarns through that loop. Here's a close-up. There's also a special way that you can tie an overhand knot, and that is by, instead of pulling the end through the loop you've created, you can pull a secondary loop that you've folded through that loop. What that then creates is a loop at the end of a piece of yarn that won't tighten like a slip knot would. I use this when I'm attaching yarn to my netting shuttle, which is what I use when I'm lashing on. The Larks Head is an incredibly important knot, and it's used often to attach the apron rod to a loom. You start with a piece of thread or string that has been folded in half, and then you create a loop by folding it and pulling the other legs of the yarn through that loop that you just created. Then you can slip it onto your apron rod and pull it snug, and it forms a very, very strong connection with the front of your loom so that you can tie on your warp securely. I also use the Lark's Head when tying on a warp to my sectional beam. I create out of a length of yarn one giant loop that I've tied with an overhand knot, and then after wrapping it around the bar, I pull a loop through the other end of the loop, and then I form the Lark's Head again by pulling the legs of the yarn through the loop at the end. Then I can put my knotted warp in and tighten it down, and it's ready to wind on the back beam. The slip knot is very effective when you want a knot that is very easy to take out and is temporary. I don't really use it as most people would use a slip knot to tighten down on a loop. What I use it as is a way of temporarily holding my warp threads into bouts or bundles so that they won't fall through the reed. or fall back through the heddles when I'm threading the heddles. I create a loop around my fingers and pull the leg of the bout through that loop. When I want to untie it, I simply pull the end and the knot comes undone completely. Here's another way from the other hand. Next we'll talk about the square knot. This is a simple way to join two ends of yarn together. First of all, you'll take the right end of the yarn and put it over the left end. And then you'll twist the right end under the other end. Then you're going to do the opposite. You're going to take what is now the left yarn, put it over the right yarn, wrap it underneath, in through that hole, and pull securely. It's a really, really strong knot that is a lot easier to undo than some other ways of joining two ends of yarn. The surgeon's knot is commonly used while tying a warp onto the front beam. You take your bout of yarn and split it in two. Then wrap both of those bouts around your front bar. Then come on top and tie a half hitch, and then do that motion again and tie another half hitch, then pull up and pull tight. This is a very adjustable knot. If you want to add more tension, you simply pull up and pull out. When you've got the tension to the right level, you then form another half hitch, and that will prevent it from coming undone. Let's take a look at that again. We're going to split the yarn, bring it under the bar, bring both ends on top, form a half hitch, wrap the yarn around one more time, and tighten it down. Then I form a second half hitch when I've got my tension just right. Next up is the weaver's knot. It's used to tie an old warp onto a new warp. It's a very small knot, and essentially what you do is take the new warp, put it underneath the old warp, then take the new warp, wrap it around your fingers and in between the two ends, or ears. Then take the old warp end, put it through the loop that you've created by wrapping. You're going to hold on to both of the ends or ears and pull tightly on the new warp end. And it's very strong and very small, and you can trim away the ends of the yarn very close without it unraveling. Let's see that in real time. This one I've had to watch many times and practice a lot to get right, but once you do, it is a very strong and powerful knot. The bow knot I use most commonly when I'm tying my warp and want to add choke ties. This is just like you tie your shoelace. You form a half hitch around what you want to tie with the bow knot, create a loop, wrap the yarn around that loop, and then pull the loop through the hole that you've created. The tailor's knot I use commonly while sewing, but also as an alternative way to attach a new warp to an old warp. The essence of this knot is an overhand knot tied around two yarns. So you'll see I'll take both ends, line them up, create a loop, pull it through, and tighten. But this can be accomplished much more efficiently with a true tailor's knot. We're going to take the ends and line them up as before. Then once we do that, we're going to wrap it around our index finger, with the ends of the yarn somewhere in the middle of the pad of the finger. Wrap it around, and then with your thumb, twist the yarn off the end of your finger and pull it tight. Let's watch that again. Take two ends of yarn, put their together, wrap it around your finger, twist off, and pull. You may need to watch that a couple of times. I did.
There you have it. Those are the essential knots that I find important and I use almost every time I'm weaving. If there are some that I've forgotten or some knots that you love and you haven't seen here today, please comment below. I love to learn new things and I want people who watch my videos to have access to all of the information of this entire community here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now practice those knots and keep weaving.